Thank you very much. I really appreciate your presentation. Do we have any questions?
I'll just follow up on Mr. Chu's earlier thing. With this state being so big, there's a lot of different departments that do their own thing, and they really don't communicate. And that's a big crux of the problem, and they really should bring it under, I don't know if it's bring it under one roof or one house, but that's the big thing with that, because everyone's out there doing their own thing. And I think more importantly, we're talking about it at a statewide level, but the original, the first locally controlled high-tech crimes task force was started here in Sacramento probably about 17 or 19 years ago. There are actually 5 task forces, local task forces that are multi-jurisdictional for the Central Valley. I was a commander of the Central Valley High-Tech Crimes Task Force, and we did do intrusions, child pornography, and financial crimes. But those task forces' funding have been cut dramatically over the years because not only does it go on at the state level, but the local level too, where it's tough to do intrusions now. So, you know, while we're here talking about state issues, they do need more funding on a local level for those state task forces, and one's here at McClellan. And CHP's embedded in there, FBI's embedded in there, and when you're sitting there working together in the same office, dealing on the same issues, that's what helps, and it makes better investigators. They're communicating every day back and forth. So that's something that hopefully your select committee, Madam Chair, can take a look at and possibly increase funding for our local jurisdictions.
Thank you. All right, anybody else?
Just one quick question, if I may. I think a lot has been talked about as far as information sharing is concerned. Do you see any bottlenecks in information sharing whatsoever between, let's say, between state agencies and/or between state agencies and private parties? And what can the legislature do as a result of that?
I think when you look at information sharing, I think the biggest challenge is to make sure that all departments are reporting and reporting in a timely manner, because I think it's always a challenge when you have some of the cyber intrusions that occur of identifying what happened and getting that information shared as quickly as possible. Because as I said before, those delays are one of the challenges that we have. And so the processes are in place. We've worked closely and we continue to work closely with the ISO to make that process as simple as possible. And I think our current project of trying to make that an electronic automated reporting process to make it easier for all state departments to report, and also to make sure that information is disseminated in a quicker manner so you don't have someone having to turn it around, that it automatically makes notifications, will be one of those things that will be really helpful with those notifications.
Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. And we are down to our last 2 speakers. Michael McInerney, a senior consultant with Delta Risk, and Raj Shah, senior director for strategy at Palo Alto Networks. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon. The tech guys have to fire up their iPads first. Chair Irwin, distinguished members of the committees, thank you for inviting me to join this expert panel to speak with you about cybersecurity. My goal here today is to provide a strategic view of the challenges and opportunities that cybersecurity presents to our state and to our nation. Let me begin by expressing the seriousness of the challenges that we face. In just a few short years, cybersecurity has gone from an esoteric topic to front-page news. The President of the United States has signed 2 executive orders on cybersecurity, this one alone, including one that puts cybersecurity on the same level as terrorism and nuclear proliferation. In his remarks at Stanford University last February, President Obama called this one of the nation's most pressing national security, economic, and safety issues. Former Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta recently stated that cyber attacks are the most dangerous potential threat to the nation, and the former commander of the U.S. Cyber Command proclaimed cybercrime to be the largest transfer of wealth in history. So how did we get here? Simply put, the Internet wasn't originally designed with security in mind. Instead, its creators were more concerned about resiliency in the face of nuclear attack. At the time, no one predicted the Internet would become one of the world's primary mediums of communication, nor that e-commerce would top over $1 trillion annually. This means that, as more people and systems come online, the benefits of global connectivity go hand in hand with security challenges. Today, while major breaches at companies make headlines, it is the threat to our critical infrastructure systems that most concerns government officials. This is not to say that data breaches and intellectual property theft aren't important. They are critical economic and security issues. Rather, the threat to critical infrastructure is potentially more immediate and more dangerous. These critical systems purify our water, keep our trains running safely, and provide power to our communities. They are essential to safety and the operations of our economy, and they are also deeply vulnerable to cyber attacks. I should also add that many of these systems fall under some degree of state control. Recently discovered cyber espionage campaigns, such as Dragonfly, demonstrate that computer exploitation tools have been used to penetrate industrial control networks, providing adversaries a means to sabotage systems like those controlling the electrical grid and oil pipelines. Additionally, databases like Shodan highlight myriad unpatched bugs in our nation's critical infrastructure. The good news is that we can do something about this. Cyberspace is an entirely human-constructed domain, and we can develop the tools and policies to secure ourselves while also maintaining privacy and protecting civil liberties. In addition to the recent presidential executive orders, Congress is currently debating legislation covering information sharing, new authorities for homeland security, public-private partnerships, and acquisition reform. Furthermore, federal spending on cybersecurity now stands at over $14 billion annually. However, real progress will require an effort that is led by government but encourages solutions developed outside of government. Unlike some other areas of national security, our entire nation must be involved in this effort. Every person who can be phished and every company that can be breached is a potential access point for an adversary to leverage. In other words, this challenge is too big to be left to Washington alone. The nation needs California to lead. Currently, there are a few disparate efforts underway across the state. For example, the Attorney General has made online safety and cybercrimes priorities. The National Guard has been conducting risk assessments for state agencies, which we heard about earlier. The Hewlett Foundation has given over $30 million to Stanford and Berkeley to study cybersecurity. And San Diego has established a cybersecurity center of excellence that combines local businesses, universities, and the military community. Several state agencies have also formed an ad hoc task force in an attempt to grapple with cyber issues. While invaluable initial steps, the stark reality is that these efforts don't go nearly far enough. There's a reason why the President came to California to deliver his groundbreaking speech on cybersecurity. California is the global center for technology, invention, and popular culture. We are the home of many of the world's leading universities and companies, and our citizens, from San Diego to San Francisco and beyond, are driving the economy of the future. California also has experience leading on other highly technological and politically complex issues, such as energy and climate change. As a result, the nation is looking to us, to our ingenuity, our drive, and our ambition. They're looking to us to take these attributes that made our state the innovation capital of the world and use them to overcome these serious national challenges. By building on these efforts, leveraging our unique resources, and keeping in mind the bigger picture, California could make a profound difference. Thank you.
Why don't we wait for questions after, and Mr. Shaw, go ahead.
Chairwoman, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for this kind invitation to join you and this esteemed group of experts to speak on cybersecurity. The private sector plays a very important role in the cyber ecosystem. It is a primary developer of technology, owner of infrastructure, and target of malicious attacks. My objective today is to share a few insights from the private sector, as well as encourage further opportunities for public-private collaboration. Over the last 2 years, cybersecurity has become one of, if not the, central national security and economic challenges facing our nation and our state in particular. The large breaches at Sony, Target, Home Depot, Anthem, I could go on, have galvanized CEOs and board members at companies of all sizes to view cybersecurity as the core to the fabric of business operation. Security is no longer an IT problem to be solved with checklists, but a strategic and existential concern at the board level. And I'm encouraged that in parallel, senior leaders are convening in this room are thinking strategically about that issue. California is uniquely positioned at the epicenter of the private sector cybersecurity sphere. The largest networking companies in the world, Cisco and Juniper, the foundational social media companies, Facebook, Twitter, and leading security companies, such as my own employer, Palo Alto Networks, are all headquartered here in California. Over 450 startups focused on cybersecurity received venture funding in the past year, the vast majority of them calling this state home. Even a half dozen cyber-specific venture funds have formed here over the last 2 years. And personally, having experienced the journey from building an early-stage security startup, raising capital, and merging with a larger security company, I firmly believe the Silicon Valley cybersecurity ecosystem is unrivaled in the world and will help lead in the building of next-generation cyber defenses. So I want to share a few important trends in cyber defense that have recently taken root. The first is the prevention of attacks. Merely detecting attacks is not sufficient. We must strive to prevent them. In other words, we should align our people, processes, and technology to prevent an adversary from being successful in the very first place. Some proponents of legacy architectures have resigned themselves to believing attacks cannot be stopped, and that rapid remediation is the only answer. We must reject that notion. It's very difficult to remediate your source code once it's already in a foreign nation, or your personal credit card data that's being sold on the black market. So prevention can be achieved, is message one, and it can be achieved by reducing the attack surface through technology, automating systems to react to threats in real time, and by adopting the kill chain methodology of thinking of adversary behavior. So by addressing the kill chain, or in other words, the sequence of events, about 7 technical steps that an adversary must complete to successfully conduct his cyber attack, you can use a platform that has strong protections at each one of those stages to maximize your ability to protect. So for example, no single protection is ever foolproof. But even if you're successful at only 90% of every single one of those 7 stages, in totality, you then can achieve real protection. And I think this trend towards protection bodes well for all defenders, both public and private. The second key trend in the private sector is information sharing. Herd immunity is a real and valid concept in cybersecurity. Cyber attack tools and methodologies are often reused by attackers, including nation states. Sharing in an automated, real-time fashion key details of an attack can absolutely help shut down attackers. The financial sector, through the FSISEC, Financial Services Information Sharing and Collaboration, has pioneered sharing, and the government is progressing towards sharing legislation. As Mike said, President Obama recently held a White House summit on cybersecurity at Stanford University, the first summit ever held outside of D.C., and there he signed an executive order enabling threat intel data sharing. But that's just the start. Technology vendors in the private sector have to play a role. Within my own company, for example, our 5,000 customers we centrally share data that any one company gets attacked, within 15 minutes, every other company is protected automatically. 4 key vendors, competitors, Palo Alto Networks, Symantec, McAfee, and Fortinet, have recently created the first formal intel threat sharing construct called the Cyber Threat Alliance, which is open to all organizations and today is sharing tens of thousands of unique malware samples daily amongst 8 technology vendors using a format called Styx Taxi. This CTA, the Cyber Threat Alliance, I believe also represents an opportunity for the state of California to be involved. California has historically led our nation in pushing forward innovative solutions to critical issues, and I believe that we have the opportunity in cyber through strong public-private partnerships to continue that tradition. Thank you.
You ended it so abruptly. Okay, now I'm ready. All right, so I first had a couple of questions for Mr. McInerney. Let's see, you were talking about these recent executive orders at the national level, and what does that mean for California?
So as Raj pointed out, one of the executive orders is with regard to information sharing. And this is actually also a topic of legislation in Congress right now on Capitol Hill. It's a priority for the Congress, it's a priority for the federal government to allow greater information sharing between private sector entities and also between the government and the private sector. That will definitely have profound impacts on California, both with the state agencies that are going to do business with the federal government, as well as our companies here, our large tech companies that will be part of that information sharing process. So that's a key and definitely something to follow as things progress on Capitol Hill. The other primary executive order was really about sanctions, essentially, trying to raise the cost of foreign actors, hostile foreign actors conducting cyber attacks and cyber espionage on the United States. Essentially, sanctions executive order saying if you're found to do this, then we can levy certain sanctions, just like they do for terrorists and those who would do nuclear proliferation. That has the potential to impact California in that we have, businesses here, but that's largely, in my mind, a federal issue, the second one.
Right, and we were talking about legislation that Congress is trying to push through. What is actually the probability that that's going to pass? And then, kind of as a second part, is there legislation that California should look at?
Yes, great question. So, the probability of anything passing Congress is kind of anyone's guess today. There's no Moore's Law for Congress, right? In fact, it kind of gets twice as bad every year. No offense to anyone in the audience, of course. I'll hear about that one later. The things that have the most likelihood of passing Congress, in my estimation, number one is this information sharing legislation. There's a bill in the House and a complementary bill in the Senate. They have both, I think, come out of committee, certainly the one in the Senate has, and seem to have some traction. There have been some privacy and civil liberties concerns with them, but they do appear to be working those out. One of the primary sponsors of that bill is actually Senator Feinstein, so that may be an opportunity for California to kind of work together. I see that definitely having the potential to pass. There are also other measures to try to strengthen authorities for the Department of Homeland Security to reform acquisition. Those are all possible, but right now I think the most likely one is probably information sharing. Now, California, that leaves a couple opportunities. I think that there is opportunity, kind of to Raj's point, for a complementary legislation to that federal effort. There may be some things that get left out or some things you would like put in there, and so that would be a great opportunity for us here in California. And also to kind of lead the way to show that, California understands this issue and is promulgating legislation as a result. In listening to the testimony previously, I really liked what the state agencies, particularly the National Guard, had to say about conducting state assessments. I think that's probably some low-hanging fruit without being an expert. That's worth going after and worth empowering. And then finally, I would say that at a high level, I think it's going to be important to make sure that cybersecurity doesn't devolve into a series of bureaucratic stovepipes. It's more than just a law enforcement issue. It's more than just a network security issue. It's more than just a disaster preparedness issue. It is part of a larger issue of national security and economic competitiveness and civil liberties. And so I think someone somewhere needs to be thinking about that larger picture and making sure that it just doesn't get lost in the weeds. So those would be my recommendations.
Okay, so do you think California is where it should be?
I think California can be doing a lot more. California is not, in the realm of other, compared to other states, kind of compared to what? Compared to other states. It's not where I look to for leadership on this issue at this point, but it's not in the driving up the rear either. When I look for leadership on this issue, I look to probably Maryland and Virginia that are doing interesting things, trying to leverage their connections with the federal government. I look to Michigan, that's being very bold in its ideas about how to protect critical infrastructure. And I look to Texas, which is really, really interested in the economic development aspect of this. And so those are the kinds of the things that kind of pop to my mind as really the top.
Right, and then maybe you can go a little bit more into, you mentioned critical infrastructure. Do you think there needs to be, you're looking at regulation at the federal level, does there need to be regulation on critical infrastructure?
So for critical infrastructure, I think it's important to kind of double down on exactly what we're talking about. These are entities that are critical to life or economic stability, and if they went down, there would be catastrophic harm. This would then preclude, 99% of normal businesses and entities. But for that small fraction of entities that are deemed critical, I do think that's something we should look at very seriously.
All right, thank you. And then I have some questions for Mr. Shaw. How would you describe the security, from, I guess, what you've heard today in your experience, the security of our state agencies?
Well, I was very pleased to hear the the seriousness in which I think people are approaching this issue. Certainly having the base of knowledge to go and pursue it. But my sense is that to really secure a network, a large organization, you really need to align, as I said, your people, your process, and your technology to really have best-of-breed solutions. And a lot of these solutions are not built in-house. So I think you need to be open to seeing what do private companies do? What do other large organizations do? How do we automate a lot of these efforts such that when you do get an alert or you do see a situation that you're not really reliant on human speed? How can you do this at computer speed? So again, so I guess to answer your question directly, I was pleased to see with the direction that we saw in the room today, but I think there's certainly a lot more that can be done by talking with other organizations.
And how do you see California state government versus like big corporations in California on security?
Sure. You know, they have some of the same challenges, big companies as well as, you know, California state government. Lots of disparate networks, lots of legacy solutions that are using old, outdated OSs. So I think there's a lot of similarities that you draw upon each other. I think in the private sector, some of the advantages in terms of being able to shift resources quicker, in terms of being able to hire talent easier, allows them to respond to the changing nature of the threat. Right? This is a threat that every few months is a little bit different and may require different skill sets. I think there's one thing, though, that the state of California could take advantage of that private companies have more difficulty, which is relationships with the federal government and other institutions. Right? There is a broad recognition at the federal level, at the federal military level. So in addition to my civilian job, I'm a reservist in the Air Force supporting Cyber Command. Cyber Command is very excited about what technologies are being built here in the Valley and the relationships that are required. So they're setting up something called the Point of Presence, which I'm involved in, which is a group of active duty as well as reserve officers that will be stationed at Moffett, working very closely with Colonel Buteau and General Baldwin's teams there. And this relationship, I think, is a great opportunity for the state of California to get access to cutting-edge technology, to be part of that conduit between the private sector companies that own the core infrastructure and that are the ones being attacked, and the folks that have the best intelligence. And I think that will only help make California's own networks more strong and protective.
Okay, so a little bit, can we work better with the private sector as state government? And would the private sector, in your opinion, be a willing participant? Absolutely.
I think there's broad desire in the private sector to work closely with the government, especially state government and law enforcement and first responders. I think the key issue is to have greater forums such as this, to have dialogue between the two groups, to use some existing constructs to share data and be involved in these. I think this Cyber Threat Alliance would be a great start. So I think there's a very broad desire in the private sector to do this. We need to find the right mechanism to do so and to work at the speed required.
Right, and then my last question, at least, how has the private sector responded to these threats as far as budget-wise, their IT budgets?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think this is really an existential threat. Every board member at a Fortune 500 company around the world today knows that this could end their business. So data point example, JP Morgan recently suffered a breach. Their CEO has publicly announced that they are increasing their cyber spending from $250 million to $500 million annually. This is just security. This is a very large component, 20 to 25% of their total IT budget. So I think you're seeing this around the world where resources are being applied to this. This is not an IT issue. This is an existence of company issue.
All right. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions from our chat?
I think you may have answered the question already. The previous comment you made was that the government could be a part of the Cyber Threat Alliance, CTA, and I think you may have touched on it, if not totally answered it. If you didn't, please add to that.
In terms of can the government be a part of it? Right. Yeah, absolutely. So it's an open construct to any organization, be they a technology vendor, a government, a company itself. There are certain minimum entry requirements because we want people to take it seriously, and the primary one is to be able to provide 1,000 unique pieces of malicious malware a day. So so we want serious organizations, but this immunity issue is real. The more organizations that join this, the better we will all be as defenders.
All right. Anything else? Okay. Well, that looks like the conclusion of our hearing today, and really appreciate everybody for coming and bringing awareness to the magnitude of the threat in front of us. So I do want to just mention that I am carrying 2 pieces of legislation on the topic that hopefully will improve the state's cybersecurity process and posture, and that is AB 670, which will require state agency, departments, and offices to receive regular security network assessments to reveal vulnerabilities that can be patched up before they're exploited. This follows recommendations from our own cybersecurity task force as well as the National Governors Association. And secondly, AB 739, which would address liability concerns in the private sector relevant to the sharing of cybersecurity threat information. This will allow companies to create a neighborhood watch for cybersecurity that's organic and privately funded. And again, I would like to thank everybody that came and spoke to us today, and I would like to thank the committee for participating. Thank you very much.
Thank you.